Canada and elsewhere, the idea that commodity prices should be stabilized is central to economic policies in agriculture. Proponents say these policies are essential to the industry. But what are the wider effects of policies such as Canada's supply management of dairy and poultry products? With me to discuss this is David Seymour from the Frontier Centre for Public Policy.
Hi.
Hi. David, what is the rationale behind policies that are supposed to stabilize commodity prices, and how do they work?
Well, the initial argument is always that the prices for an agricultural commodity are either too low or too unstable, so the prices must increase if producers are to survive.
But if the prices are higher, surely more people will want to produce the product, and the competition would be just as fierce as before.
Yeah, sure, and worse still, consumers will generally buy less of a commodity if it's more expensive. So further measures are immediately necessary to stabilize the market, and this usually means restricting competitors from entering that market.
What do you mean by restricting competition?
Well, one way is to have a quota system within a country. So anyone who wants to produce a good needs to have a license to do that. Limited licenses then mean limited production, which in turn leads to higher prices. But another approach is to block foreign imports using tariffs, a specific tax on imports to reduce foreign competition. Now, Canada's supply management system for dairy and poultry products is actually an example of both of those things.
So the industry gets less competition and higher prices, while consumers get less supply and higher prices.
Well, yes, that's the only effect that a policy restricting production and competition could have. And this might seem like a technicality, but in fact it's not necessarily good for the industry. It is good for the incumbent producers who receive the insider benefits of restricted competition and so on.
That aside, couldn't you argue that if stable prices stop producers going out of business, then the higher prices are a just cost of consumers that have to pay for a stable supply?
Well, again, it goes back to the fact that it's not the industry as an institution that is protected, but certain producers within it. Normally, drops in prices would force the most inefficient producers out of business and allow the more efficient producers to grow. As a result, keeping the prices artificially inflated actually reduces the average efficiency of the industry.
This can still be seen, though, as the price of keeping producers around.
Well, if it is, then the cure is worse than the disease, because by slowing down the process of producers becoming more efficient, the policy actually drives up the real prices that consumers pay over time. And we've seen evidence of this recently in Australia, where they removed quotas and import restrictions for dairy products.
You'd expect that prices would drop and the quantity produced would rise.
Well, certainly, and that's actually what happened. Milk prices did drop by 20 to 30%, and the amount of milk produced actually increased.
And what about the producers?
Well, there was a drop in the number of producers, but that just highlighted the difference between the industry and the incumbent producers. The Australian dairy industry was fine after they removed the quotas and protective trade barriers, but even if competition put some producers out of business, the industry was still better off.
This all sounds a bit heartless.
Well, perhaps if you view it from the point of view of the inefficient producers who went out of business, sure. But once you look at the consumers who get cheaper products, the efficient producers who get more market share, then things start to balance out at an ethical level for most people, I think. As usual, the key to understanding the economic policy is to look at both the short-term effects on some and the long-term effects on all groups.
If you follow this to its logical conclusion, there's no net benefit derived from policies that try to stabilize commodity prices. They can only favor some producers at the expense of other producers, the consumers, or both.
Well, yes, that's very much the case. Politically, though, of course, privileged producers will do their best to protect their favorable positions. But an open market with freely moving prices is still the best deal for the average person over time.
To summarize, commodity producers often claim their industry needs special protection. Attempts to increase the commodity prices usually prompt restrictions on market access. Price controls ultimately mean higher prices for consumers and less opportunity for more efficient producers. In our next episode, we analyze government price fixing more generally. I'm Jamie Stevenson, and thank you for watching On the Other Hand.